The midday sun blazed over Fort Lincoln, a U.S. Army base in Southern California, its heat dancing off the tarmac like a warning. Beyond the security gates, civilians gathered in neat rows behind velvet ropes, eyes fixed on the ceremonial parade ground where the honor guard would soon begin their precision drill, a rare event the public was invited to witness. To the crowd, it was a spectacle. Crisp uniforms, synchronized movements, a glimpse into a tradition that few truly understood. To Sergeant First Class Marcus Hale, however, it was sacred. He stood motionless at the edge of the formation zone, his dress uniform immaculate, boots polished to a mirror shine, ribbons and medals resting silently over his chest. A veteran of 2 combat tours, Hale carried himself with a quiet weight that didn't need explanation. He wasn't there for show. He was there because tradition mattered, because discipline, duty, and sacrifice weren't abstract ideals, but bricks in the wall that held the country together. But not everyone saw it that way. Through the murmurs of anticipation and the respectful silence of military families, the sharp clack of designer heels broke the moment. A woman in an expensive cream-colored blazer and oversized sunglasses breezed through the rope line like it was made for other people. Her name was Vanessa Strickland, a social media influencer and wife of a high-profile defense contractor. And in her mind, rules were for the rule-bound. "I just need a quick shot," she said with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes, brushing past an elderly veteran holding his grandson's hand. "Ma'am, this area's restricted," the junior officer began, only to be cut off with a flick of her wrist. "I have clearance," she lied, already positioning herself in the direct path of the incoming guard formation, her phone raised high like a scepter of entitlement. She didn't see the honor guard as soldiers. To her, they were set pieces for content, props in a curated moment of online perfection. But she was about to learn what happens when you mistake ceremony for theater, and forget that behind every motionless figure in uniform stands a warrior trained not to perform, but to protect. And that some lines are not drawn in chalk, but in sacrifice, and they are never crossed without consequence. Fort Lincoln sat like a fortress of time and purpose on the edge of the Mojave. It wasn't the kind of base that made headlines or hosted dignitaries. It was a place where soldiers were made, tested, and hardened. Surrounded by open desert and vast skies, its blistering heat and endless winds had shaped generations of warfighters. On this particular Saturday, the normally closed gates had swung open to the public for a ceremonial review of the honor guard, a chance for civilians to glimpse the discipline and legacy that pulsed through every inch of military life. The parade grounds were a picture of control. Flags snapping in the breeze, formations chalked with precision, the air heavy with anticipation. Spectators clustered under shaded canopies, some wiping sweat from their brows, others clutching miniature American flags. Children sat on their parents' shoulders. Veterans in worn campaign hats stood silently at attention, their eyes already tracking the sunlit field with something close to reverence. And at the heart of it all stood Sergeant First Class Marcus Hale. 43 years old, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, with a sharp jaw and faded scar running along his temple, a souvenir from his second deployment. His dress blues fit with tailored precision, bearing the marks of a soldier who had not just worn the uniform but lived every thread of it. Service stripes, combat infantryman badge, 2 bronze stars. But none of that defined him more than what couldn't be stitched to his chest. An unwavering calm in chaos, and a belief that honor isn't earned in moments of comfort, but in the face of provocation. To those who knew him, Hale was a mentor, a soldier's soldier. His voice never needed to rise. His presence did the talking. He believed that the real test of discipline wasn't in combat, but in restraint, in standing your ground when it would be easier to push back. In upholding the uniform not just with action, but with patience. It was that very patience that would soon be tested. The woman disrupting the stillness was Vanessa Strickland, and she wasn't here for tradition. Clad in white slacks, heels unsuited for tarmac, and a blouse that probably cost more than most soldiers made in a month, Vanessa had arrived with a purpose, but not one rooted in respect. She wanted a photo, a moment, a clip. Her brand thrived on proximity to power, and what better backdrop than soldiers standing in formation? To her, this was a staged event. To Marcus Hale, it was a living ritual passed down through generations of warriors. One meant to remind the nation that freedom didn't come from hashtags or headlines, but from men and women who stood post day after day without complaint. He watched her step over the line, not just the rope, but something deeper, a line carved into the spirit of the uniform. And T. Vanessa Strickland didn't ask for permission. She never had to. As the whispers of disapproval rippled through the crowd, she strode confidently across the rope line, her heels clicking against the pavement like punctuation marks on her privilege. Behind her oversized sunglasses, her eyes scanned the field for the perfect angle. The sunlight, the symmetry of the flags, and of course, the line of immaculately dressed soldiers soon to arrive. "I just need one perfect shot," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. The young private stationed near the barrier stepped forward, visibly nervous. "Ma'am, you really can't be in that area. It's an active ceremonial route." Vanessa barely turned her head. "Do I look like I'm here to cause trouble?" she said, waving him off with the same hand that clutched a $1,000 phone. "I'm the wife of a defense contractor, sweetheart. We practically fund this place." The private hesitated, glancing toward a senior non-commissioned officer for guidance. But before he could respond, a firmer voice cut through the desert air. "Ma'am, step back behind the line," came the calm but authoritative voice of Sergeant Marcus Hale. He hadn't moved from his post, but his voice carried weight. A voice that had once called men to cover under fire, that had steadied troops in the chaos of urban warfare. It wasn't loud, but it made people listen. Vanessa turned slowly, visibly annoyed. "Excuse me?" "You're standing in a restricted zone," Hale continued, eyes steady beneath his visor. "The honor guard will be passing through here in 5 minutes. For your safety, and theirs, I need you to step back now." The crowd, which had grown quiet, watched with bated breath. Some held their phones, already recording. A few veterans in attendance exchanged knowing looks. They had seen moments like this before. People who mistook discipline for display, tradition for entertainment. Vanessa laughed, sharp and theatrical. "For my safety? Oh, please. They're just doing a little march, right? This isn't Fallujah." Marcus Hale didn't blink. "No, ma'am. It's not. But those men are trained for far more than marching. They're here to represent every soldier who ever stood a post." She rolled her eyes and turned back to her camera. "I'll be out of your way in 30 seconds. "You're in their path," Hale said, his voice firming. "They will not change it. They don't stop. Not for cameras. Not for anyone." "Then maybe they need a lesson in customer service," she snapped. That was when it happened. Subtle, but unmistakable. A child nearby tugged on his father's sleeve and whispered, "Daddy, is she allowed to be there?" And that single question exposed the truth for everyone watching. Vanessa wasn't just taking a photo. She was crossing a line, not a visible one, but a moral one. She was mocking what others held sacred. But she didn't see it. All she saw was a phone screen and a chance to go viral. "Ma'am," Hale said one final time, "this is your last warning." Her only reply was a smirk as she lifted her phone high and planted her feet even deeper into the ceremonial path. And just like that, the conflict was no longer about a photo. It was about what happens when pride walks into the path of purpose. He didn't move a muscle. Hale knew something was about to change. The air on the parade ground changed. It was subtle, just a shift in weight, a silence that thickened, like the moment before a storm hits. Those who had come for photos now held their breaths. Conversations halted. Veterans in attendance stood a little straighter. Children clutched the hands of their parents. Everyone could hear it. The distant sound of boots striking pavement in perfect cadence. The honor guard was approaching. Fort Lincoln's honor guard was not just ceremonial. Every man and woman in that formation had been deployed, some more than once. Their march wasn't theater. It was muscle memory forged in heat and fear, trained to precision for moments of representation. Yes, but always with the soul of something deeper. They carried with them the weight of history and sacrifice, the echo of those who never came home. At the front of the unit marched Staff Sergeant Elijah Ward, a former infantry squad leader turned ceremonial commander. His posture was exact, his eyes fixed ahead, yet scanning the path for even the smallest anomaly. He had led soldiers through hostile territory, had carried brothers to medevacs, had delivered folded flags to mothers who answered the door with trembling hands. Today, he led a different kind of mission, but one no less sacred. And in his path stood Vanessa Strickland. She hadn't moved an inch. Despite being warned by both a private and Sergeant Hale, she remained rooted in place like a monument to defiance. Her lips curled into a smug smile as the sound of the approaching formation grew louder. The camera app on her phone was open now, already recording. She adjusted her sunglasses with the confidence of someone who believed rules were suggestions, at least for people like her. Behind her, Sergeant Hale's expression hadn't changed. He remained at attention, but inside, something tightened. He knew the protocol. The guards wouldn't stop. The march would not break. It couldn't. That was the point. You didn't bend tradition for convenience. You didn't interrupt duty for vanity. The last time Marcus Hale had seen this kind of arrogance, it wasn't in the U.S. It was in a market in Kandahar, when a journalist refused to listen to warnings, crossing into restricted space with a press badge and a smirk. He'd had to carry that man to safety after the explosion. He wasn't about to carry another. Nearby, an older woman, clutching a bouquet of red, white, and blue flowers, whispered, "She's going to get hurt." A teenage boy muttered to his father, "Why don't they just stop?" His father, himself a retired Marine, answered softly, "Because if they stop for her, they stop for everything. Then there's no guard at all." Vanessa glanced around, seemingly aware that the attention had shifted entirely to her. She smiled, not kindly, but like someone who thinks they've won. The drumming cadence of the honor guard grew louder, and now the soldiers came into view. 20 strong in matching uniforms, their faces unreadable, movements perfectly synchronized. Their polished boots struck the tarmac with the rhythm of history, their shoulders squared, rifles angled in ceremonial precision. Staff Sergeant Ward saw her immediately. Obstacle, female, civilian. Recording. He didn't flinch, he didn't pause, he didn't even blink. The formation's course didn't waver. Vanessa raised her voice over the approaching march. "What are they going to do? Run me over? This isn't a war zone, it's America. I have rights." She turned back toward the crowd as if expecting applause. There was none. What met her instead were 100 silent stares, some confused, many disappointed, and a few deeply saddened. They'd seen this before, not just here, but everywhere the line between respect and entitlement began to blur. Still, Vanessa stood her ground. "I'm filming this for my followers. When people see how your precious military bullies civilians, they're going to have a lot to say." Her voice carried over the crowd like a dare, like bait. Sergeant Hale didn't move, but something in his eyes had changed. He'd seen enough. He didn't call out. He didn't raise his voice. He simply broke formation, one sharp step forward like snapping a seal, and began walking toward her. Each footfall measured, deliberate, calm. The crowd stirred. Vanessa noticed too. "Oh, now you're coming to arrest me? Go ahead, touch me, and you'll hear from my husband's legal team before you finish your paperwork." But Hale said nothing. When he reached her, he didn't grab her, didn't threaten her. He simply stopped, hands behind his back, and stood between her and the oncoming honor guard, blocking her camera's view, his back to the soldiers, his face to hers. There was no aggression, only presence. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I'm asking you, one last time." Vanessa looked at him, finally, as if actually seeing him for the first time. The medals, the jaw, the steady, unshaken resolve of someone who had faced far worse than words. "I don't think you understand what this is," Hale continued. "This isn't a photo op. This isn't a costume parade. You're standing in the path of something that was never meant to move for you." His voice softened, but only in tone, not in meaning. "You want to make a statement? Fine. But don't do it by disrespecting people who have sworn to protect your right to do so." Behind him, the honor guard closed in, still silent, still flawless, 20 boots stepping in unison, less than 10 yards away. "Please," Hale said, his voice now low, almost fatherly. "Step back, let them pass." For one moment, one fleeting beat, Vanessa looked uncertain. Her grip on her phone loosened, her lips parted as if to say something. But no words came, and the silence stretched like a held breath. Would she move? Or would pride finish what it had started? The honor guard was now less than 5 yards away. Their boots struck the pavement in unison, one thunderous beat after another, echoing across the grounds like the pulse of tradition itself. Sunlight shimmered off polished brass and ceremonial rifles. Their faces remained unreadable, their bearing unbroken. They weren't looking at Vanessa. They weren't even looking at Hale. They were locked into the discipline of duty, into the sacred rhythm of something larger than themselves. And yet all eyes outside that formation were fixed on the scene unfolding in front of them. Sergeant First Class Marcus Hale stood between the approaching formation and the woman who had made herself an obstacle. He didn't raise a hand. He didn't touch her. He simply stood, immovable, calm, and absolute. Vanessa's camera was still rolling, but for once, she didn't know what to do with it. There was something about Hale that unsettled her, not in a way she could define, but in the way he never flinched, never blinked, never broke from a composure she had no power over. "I told you already," she said again, her voice wavering. "I have every right." "And I told you," Hale interrupted, softly but firmly, "this isn't about rights, it's about respect." Behind him, the first row of soldiers was nearly upon them. "Ma'am," he said, one final time, his voice steady as a flag in wind, "if you don't step back, I will move you. Not out of force, not out of anger, but because I will not allow you to put yourself or others in danger. That's my duty. Even when I shouldn't have to." She opened her mouth to protest, but she didn't finish. Because in that instant, seconds before contact, Hale stepped to the side and did what she never expected. He dropped to one knee. He turned slightly, placed one hand on the ground, and extended the other toward her. Not in command, not in frustration, but in invitation. "Let me help you," he said. "That's all I'm trying to do." The moment froze. The formation was still moving, but everything else stopped. The crowd held its breath. Even the guards, now within arm's reach, continued forward like clockwork, their commander trusting Hale to handle the situation without disruption. Vanessa stared at the outstretched hand, her breath caught. Something cracked, not loud, not visible, but internal. She wasn't used to being offered help without strings. She wasn't used to someone who could have humiliated her, choosing grace instead. For the first time since she arrived, Vanessa Strickland blinked and stepped back, one foot, then another. She reached out, hesitant, almost surprised by her own decision, and placed her manicured fingers into Hale's gloved palm. He rose without a word, guiding her just beyond the edge of the ceremonial path, 3 feet that made all the difference. Then he stepped away, nodding once to the commander of the formation, who hadn't broken stride. And as Staff Sergeant Ward and the honor guard marched through the corridor of watching civilians, past where Vanessa had stood, past the place where duty might have collided with defiance, nothing needed to be said. Their presence spoke for them. The soldiers passed like flowing steel. Crisp, honorable, unstoppable. A living memory of every war zone, every night watch, every folded flag delivered in sorrow. Not actors, not props, soldiers. The crowd erupted into quiet applause. It wasn't loud, it wasn't for show. It was the sound of understanding. The collective release of tension, of recognition that they had just witnessed something more than a military drill. They had seen the strength it takes not to retaliate, but to protect, even in the face of disrespect. Vanessa stood silently, sunglasses now pushed up into her hair, phone lowered, no longer recording. Her expression had changed, the sharpness had faded. Something else had taken its place, something unfamiliar and uncomfortable, humility. She didn't speak, not yet. Sergeant Hale returned to his position at parade rest, not a muscle out of place, not a trace of ego in his actions, as if none of it had happened, as if this was just another post. But everyone who had witnessed it knew better, especially Vanessa. She turned slowly, feeling the weight of eyes that no longer looked at her with curiosity or envy, but with a quiet, unspoken challenge. "Are you still the same person you were 10 minutes ago?" The young private she had dismissed earlier approached carefully. "Ma'am," he said with quiet sincerity, "are you all right?" She hesitated, then nodded once. "I think so." Her voice was softer now, almost human. He nodded back, not with judgment, but with that same quiet discipline that echoed throughout the entire base. "Thank you for stepping back," he said, then returned to his station. Vanessa turned toward Sergeant Hale, who remained still, watching the final elements of the formation pass. She didn't interrupt him. She simply stood, unsure whether she should speak, unsure if anything she could say would matter now. And yet, she whispered anyway. "I didn't understand," she said, more to herself than to him. Not until just now. Hale didn't turn, but his voice, low and calm, reached her ear. Understanding always comes at a cost, he said, but the best lessons are the ones that don't come too late. And with that, he returned to silent attention, standing not just for ceremony, but for the weight of every lesson learned the hard way. The formation completed its final turn and came to a halt at the far end of the parade ground. The sound of marching boots faded into stillness, replaced by the rustle of flags and the occasional murmur of a humbled crowd. No commands were shouted, no words exchanged, just silence and respect. Vanessa Strickland remained near the rope line, apart from the others now, not because of arrogance, but because she didn't quite know how to rejoin the crowd. Something about crossing that invisible boundary had left a mark, not on her skin, but deeper. She looked down at her phone. The screen had stopped recording. Somewhere between Hale's steady gaze and the outstretched hand, she had forgotten about the camera entirely. For the first time in a long while, she didn't care if anyone online saw what just happened. A boy nearby tugged at his father's sleeve and whispered, "She moved." His father simply nodded. "That's good," he said. Vanessa turned toward them, her lips parting slightly, but she said nothing. What was there to say? Sergeant Hale stepped down from his position at attention and quietly rejoined a group of soldiers near the flagpole. He didn't acknowledge her. He didn't need to. His job was done. Not just as a ceremonial guard, but as a protector of something that couldn't be touched or trampled: honor. A man in a navy cap with faded gold lettering, Vietnam veteran, approached her gently. He looked like he'd seen wars she could only imagine, but his eyes held no bitterness, only something that looked a lot like grace. "He didn't have to offer you his hand," the veteran said quietly. Vanessa turned to him. "I know. But he did," the man continued, "because that's what real strength looks like. Not the kind that pushes back, but the kind that holds the line, even when someone tries to break it." She nodded, eyes glossy now, but she blinked quickly and turned away. "I'm not proud of what I did." "That's the beginning of understanding," the man replied. "Most people never even get there." As the crowd began to disperse, Vanessa stood a little longer, her phone forgotten, her heels planted, not in defiance, but in reflection. She hadn't just witnessed a military ceremony. She had walked into a wall of dignity and realized too late to pretend otherwise that it was her, not them, who had misunderstood what it means to stand for something. A week later, a letter arrived at Fort Lincoln. It was handwritten on thick, cream-colored stationery. The return address wasn't listed, but the signature at the bottom was clear: Vanessa Strickland. Inside was a simple message: "To whomever this reaches, I came to your base expecting a photo. I left with something I never thought I'd ask for: perspective. Please extend my thanks to Sergeant Marcus Hale." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't shame me. He simply stood where he was meant to stand. And in doing so, reminded me what real strength looks like. Tell him I'm sorry. Not just for stepping into the wrong place, but for failing to see the purpose of people like him. I know better now. Respectfully, Vanessa. Sergeant Hale read the letter in silence in the base's admin office. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He simply folded the note with care and tucked it into the breast pocket of his dress blues. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the ridge of mountains flanking the base, Hale stood watch one last time before the next rotation. The wind swept softly over the flag, and the distant sound of taps drifted faintly from a training field in the distance. He closed his eyes briefly, not in fatigue, but in stillness. Because sometimes, the most powerful change doesn't come with force, it comes with presence. Vanessa Strickland never posted the footage she captured that day. Not because it was unusable, but because it told a story she wasn't proud to share, until now. Months later, she would write an article titled "The Day I Met a Wall That Didn't Push Back" for a national publication. In it, she didn't talk about outfits or followers. She talked about honor and silence, and a soldier who taught her that not every wall is meant to be broken. Some are meant to hold the line for the rest of us. And in doing so, she passed the lesson forward, quietly, with respect, as it was given to her. If this story moved you the way it moved us, don't just scroll on. Honor, loyalty, discipline. These aren't just words stitched into a uniform. They're lived, every day by men and women who stand for something greater than themselves. Let us know in the comments, what would you have done if you were in that crowd? Have you ever witnessed someone learn a lesson about respect the hard way? Drop your thoughts, we read everyone. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who needs to be reminded of what true strength and dignity really look like. We share powerful true stories every week about courage, sacrifice, and the moments that change people forever. Until next time, respect isn't outdated, and some of the strongest walls never need to raise a fist.